Good morning, and first of all, I want to start by saying thank you, a very warm thank you to the Italian Association of Acupuncture, to Centro So-Wen, and to my friends for decades, Roberto Gatto, a very accomplished colleague, for having invited me to present at this Congress. Today I'm going to talk about the Huo Shen school, which sustains that in order to treat diseases, we need to support the young. So let's see what that means. First of all, in order to link to the spirit of this Congress, I'd like to say a few things about what I think happens in Chinese medicine when we say that there is a variety of perspectives and schools, and we get lost. Now, in my view, it's not possible that everyone sees things from the same perspective, from the same point of view, depending on where we're sitting. We are seeing different things, and therefore we may end up believing that that is the only way to look at something. But in reality, there are other perspectives, so that the same thing can be seen by other people from another angle, and that is equally valuable because this is what they see and that I cannot see. So when we think about the variety of schools of Chinese medicine, it's obvious that every writer, every doctor proposed his own or her own viewpoint. But one thing that I find really interesting is that in my experience, from what I know, and of course I don't know everything, it's impossible to know everything about Chinese medicine, none of the doctors that I've worked with and read have lost the contact with the initial tenets of Chinese medicine, which is fundamentally the relationship between yin and yang, and the fact that they are said and understood as something that generates their world. So, starting from this common point, we can then look at different facets, and one thing that needs to be said is that even when all these doctors talk about yang and yang, they're not necessarily seeing things in the same way. So what a lot of people may say is that, oh, well, we're not going to start talking about yin yang again, and because that's straightforward. And in fact, the greatest debate that has been going on for ages, and it's going on also now, is precisely concerning the way in which we understand the relationship in yang and how that works in the physiology of human beings, first of all, and secondly, in the clinic. And one example of this questioning of yin yang is the recent book by Liu Lihong, translated in English recently, called Classical Chinese Medicine, which I read in 2004, I think 2005, when a friend of mine gave me the first version in Chinese, edited and published in 2003. Now, we all start from the same point, which is the Huandine Jing. And when we inquire into this text as to what yin yang are really all about, we can find in chapter 5, which I give here, translated by Sabine Wilms, and you can find this text on our website, Happy Goat, I think Happy Goat Production or something else. And it says, as for yin yang, they are the Tao of heaven and earth, the lead rope and netting of the myriad things, the father and mother of alterations and metamorphoses, the root and beginning of giving and taking life, and the place of the Shen Ming, the palace of the Shen Ming. And then it concludes this paragraph by saying, to treat disease, we must seek its root. So the direction that the classic of Chinese medicine has given, the internal classic of Chinese medicine has given, is that there is no way we can move away from the root, which is yin yang. So again, it seems to confirm what was said before. Now, the Fire Spirit School, or the Huo Shen school, is a school that was founded by a man called Zheng Qinan. And he lived during the Qing dynasty, and he was a great scholar and doctor, and his questions were very fundamental and fundamentally connected with the Shang Lun. So he's a very educated doctor at the time. His teacher was called Liu Yuan, and Liu Yuan was more a spiritual kind of, in modern terms, teacher. He was interested in morality, in how to raise children, in how somebody could attain his own true self and be in touch with it and develop it. But we are not going to talk about this side of Zheng Qinan's sort of discourse, and we are going to concentrate on something more clinical. Then his work was continued by the lineage scholars, and you have some names of them here, and the one that whose work I know quite well is Lu Chonghan, and Lu Chonghan is somebody who's in charge of the associate professor of the Chengdu TCM University. You can read quite a lot about the Huo Shen School in English. Of course, it's not ever exhaustive once reading, but it's something. And I only give English bibliography here because I assume that most of the people who are following us today are actually not Chinese speakers. And so you can look at the, in English, at Zheng Qinan, its own work, which is a true transmission of Chinese medicine. And there are 4 scrolls. It's translated by, is a project by Yaron Seidman and other people. 1, 2, 3 scroll were translated with Li Hongming, and the scroll 4 with me. And then we have some videos of Liu Lihong on the Heiner Frohoff website, that's classicalchinesemedicine.org, and then some lectures given by Heiner himself, which can be enlightening in this direction. As far as Zheng Qinan is concerned, he wrote 3 books, A True Transmission of Chinese Medicine Principle, which is the one I just mentioned, and then other 2, which unfortunately, to my knowledge, are not available in English or in any language other than Chinese. One is called The Circular Unobstructed Method of Medicine, but you can find it with other titles as well. And then the Shanghan Eternal Treatise, also in Chinese. And now, to get a little bit into the mind of Zheng Qinan, we can look at the way he sort of thinks when he's in the clinic and when he watches other people working in the clinic. And these considerations are that most people have difficulties in prescribing medications, meaning herbs or natural substances, because they have difficulty in recognizing the syndromes. And even if they could recognize the syndromes, what would make things very complicated for them would be the differentiation between yin and yang. So again, we go back to this issue of what do we do, how do we diagnose something, and the baseline is that we need to understand yin yang. And so Zheng Qinan goes on and tries to explain how he sees it, and he basically says that when we look at the yin-yang variations, because yin-yang are the network or all living beings of 10,000 things, then we should assume that when we have changes in our body, then also there are 10,000 changes, and of course 10,000 is a symbolic number to mean endless. So when we are facing a patient, we have to sit back and think, okay, the variations of the disease here could be endless as well, and how could I best assess them? Now, a lot of people rush and at diagnosing, and they think, okay, I got it right. But in his opinion, a lot of people are actually wrong because they don't understand the way in which they should organize their own inquiry into disease. And then he himself obviously has experienced something like this, and he comes to a point where he says, well, the one thing that really is important for us to understand, which I, Zhen Qinong, I've understood only after a lot of thinking, is that there is the unification of yin-yang within the body. And only when we understand this unification of yin-yang within the body, we can understand the Shanghai Lun. If we don't, then we can't. So you understand that Zhen Qinong is very committed to the teachings of Zhang Chongjing, and tries to, like many others, hundreds of others, tries to understand what it says and to apply it in the best possible way in clinical practice. Now, if we understand the unity of yin-yang, and we will gain more and more understanding into this concept as we go on with this lecture, then if everything is united, then nothing is separated. So when we have things that are numbered in Chinese medicine, like the 6 confirmation, the 5 qi, or the 3 jiao, we need to think that really we only have 1 confirmation, 1 qi, and 1 jiao. And that we can experience from looking at the day, for instance, that when we say the 24 hours, we're talking about 1 day, yeah, and then we can separate the time of light and the time of darkness, or the dawn or the sunset, but these are moments within one thing, and this one thing is actually created by the alternations of yin yang. So Chinese medicine should, when we look at patients, when we try and understand the physiology of Chinese medicine, we need to think in a circular way and not in a linear way. However, despite the fact that yin yang are said to be equal, and they are actually tightly connected with each other, and they're one is left with the question of how the whole thing works. And one way in which Zhen Qinong gives an answer is by going back to the classics and reading in them and understanding from them that really the yang has a primary role in this relationship. And so, in the Guandina Jin, this is compared to the sun, that by rising and setting makes everything work. And which means that the yang, which is like the sun in the human body, is the one that can, by rising, give them life, and by setting too early, maybe leading to death. Or it looks as though the sun makes things grow in nature and makes things die in nature. Its absence makes things die in nature, and it is likewise the yang in the human being makes things work and come alive, and when it's less than it should be, and sometimes physiologically, then everything kind of gets into stall. This idea is also supported by Zhang Jiebing. Zhang Jiebing, I've just translated a book called a part of the Lei Jing, called Yi, and he says, I translate it into Italian, so this is just yin yang at the root. The presence of yang makes things live, alive, and the absence of yang makes things die. So again, you get in a much later author the same kind of concepts. And so yang is the one that makes everything happen from birth to growth maturation, and when it declines, it makes things contract and eventually die. Now, this is not a unique concept of these authors and Zhen Qinan, but it's also found in the I Ching when it says that Qian, pure heaven, and pure yang is number 1, and Kun, earth, pure yin, is number 2. It's found in the Neijing So-Wen chapter 5 when it says that when the yin grows as the yang grows, and the yin hides as the yang diminishes. So again, you get this idea of the sun rising and setting and things moving and going back to stillness when it's not there. And also the quote from Zhang Jibing that I've just given you. Now, according to Li Chunchuan, who's a living doctor and scholar of the Huo Shen school, there are 5 principles guiding the work of the Huo Shen school. One principle is that Yuan Qi is the master of yin and yang in the human life. So when we want to really think about yin and yang, we need to go and talk and look at Yuan Qi and see what's happening there. And the second one is that we need to understand that yang is always stored in the deepest yin. I will be explaining each one of these points in a minute. And the third principle is that all diseases result from the damage of the yang aspect of Yuan Qi, that different diagnoses can never stray away from the 6th confirmation, the Liu Jing of the Shangan Lun, and in treating diseases we need to emphasize supporting the yang. You can read this article in Classical Chinese Medicine org. Now, in addition to these principles, we have to, both Zhen Qinan talks a lot about this, but also the other people in its lineage, they say that when we look at the physiology of the body relies a lot on the strength and viability of the middle jiao, but we're not talking about the school of spleen and stomach here, but about something else that I will explain again in a minute. Now, when we talk about Yuan Qi, talking about the first principle, that Yuan Qi is the master of yin yang in human life, when we talk about Yuan Qi, we see that it's the way in which Zhen Qinan talks about it is by going back to the I Ching. And going back to the I Ching is not something that only he did. If we go back to what I've just translated into Italian, it's going to be published in the spring, I think, with commentaries, loads of commentaries. What he says in Zhang Jibing in the opening of the text, he says, I heard that Master Sung had said that those who don't understand the change, the Jing, could not call themselves imperial doctors. And he says, well, I was not really convinced about this, and I thought it was a lot of rubbish. But then I decided that I was going to look into it diligently and really understand what was meant by this sentence. And I have to conclude that medicine cannot be, medicine, the I Ching share the same root, and medicine can be explained only through the Jing. So what I'm going to do now is very much in line with tradition, with a certain tradition. So Zhen Qinan starts by saying, well, we have two realities before everything is formed. One is Qian, heaven, one is Kun, earth, and one is pure yang, Qian, and the other is pure yin. They're separated, they have no relation with each other. Then they fall in love with each other. And they start exchanging with each other. The only way they can exchange is by each one going to meet the other. And that is what we see in hexagram 11 type, which indicates how pure yang and pure yin exchange position, and that creates that unity. So we expect the same thing to happen in the human body. Now, when the two of them fall in love, and what happens is that they start having a relationship, an intimate relationship with each other, and then what the first one that starts that process is Qian, who gives one of his own qualities, one of his own lines, is in terms of the I Ching, to Kun. And now we have a new trigram, which is called Kan, water, and it represents the yin and the kidneys. You have a yang line though there, and that yang line is that pure yang coming from Chen that is gone into Kun. So we have one child, is a middle child. They make 6 children, but the main children are these two. Too long to explain why. And then Earth says, well, okay, I also like you, so let me give you a bit of myself. And then the next trigram is created, and you get the Li trigram, which is fire, yang, and heart. So you have Kan, which is water, yin, and kidneys, and Li, fire, yang, and heart. That are the in the body. They are made of both parents that are what we will be talking for in a bit. So when we will be talking about heart and kidneys, you have to always to remember that the kidneys store fire, pure fire, and that yin, Li, that is fire, stores yin, one line of yin. Then if we think about the human body and the way things work, if the external world, the meeting, the marriage, the love between Qian and Kun is expressed in them going to meet each other, then also in the body, the two trigrams will have to be more or less, have more or less the same kind of relationship. And you can see that in this drawing, in this hexagram. To verify that and support that, we can see in the old drawings for the Taiji that, in fact, it represents here the two yang lines with one yin inside, and here the two yin lines with one yang inside, which are respectively the Li and Kan trigrams, that water, fire and water. And I put them vertically so that you can more easily see them in the circle. Now, we in Chinese medicine, we talk a lot about pre-heaven and post-heaven, and the way Zhen Qinan talks about them is really interesting. He says, well, because these children, because water and fire in the body are born from heaven and earth, then they must share with heaven and earth the same essence, and also with each other they share the same essence. So what is different between them, the children, and the parents? The difference is that they occupy a different space. The parents are pre-heaven and the children are post-heaven. But that means that because, on the other hand, each one of the children contains the essence of the parents, there is no way that our life can be separated from our origins. So you are always connected with this archetypal kind of parenting. And therefore, pre-heaven lodges within us, and this is true Qi. That's Yuan Qi, it's true Qi, which is made of true Yin and true Yang. So that explains a little bit what Zhen Qi is all about, which means true. Now, the second principle is that the establishment of human life lies in the seed of Yang, stored in the deepest Yin. And there it is. We add two trigrams, but now it says, well, Li is important, yes. Fire is important, yes. But what really matters is that fire that is hidden in the Kan trigram, that seed of true fire, connected with Shen, connected with heaven, that we carry in ourselves, and it's stored in our kidneys. And that is what we need to replenish constantly. Now, the third principle is that all diseases occur because of a damage to the yang aspect of yang qi. Now, if yang is the leader and yang is the one that makes things work, then without yang, we're not alive, we're dead. So Genshin says it in a very sarcastic maybe, or a funny way, that without yang, the body is just a piece of dead flesh. Okay, so what does the yin do? So it's the yin not important? Well, actually, the only reason why we need to support the yang is because we need to keep this yin body alive. And if this yang starts diminishing, then that body will become sluggish, will start functioning less, and will become ill, and eventually it will die. So what is yin doing? Yin is the one that holds it. If you go back to the previous trigram there, you can see that that line, that yang line, is completely guarded by this yin holding it inside. So the yin holds it inside so that it can regenerate it and keep it rooted, because yang has a tendency to fly about, to fly up and out. So to be effective and to be like a fire that burns within something and keeps it warm, it needs not to go out, but it needs to stay in. So one thing that Genshin would say is that, and a lot of the people who think that yang is primary in the body, is that old age and death are not caused by yin deficiency, as it is said a lot of times, but it's caused by this yang diminishing and making the body less able to function, and therefore you start having wrinkles, and you start having white hair, and you start having the organs don't function anymore, and so on and so forth, and in the end one dies. Now we have two fires. We have the fire of the heart, it had two yang lines, and now we have the fire of the kidneys, and it has only one line. Oops. So that looks a bit complicated. So how does Genshin explain it? He says, well, the fire of the heart is ordinary fire, whereas the true fire is the fire that is in the kidneys, so this yang line here. Now, ordinary fire resides above anatomically and dominates yang. This is where the yang is strong, is concentrated. We have two yang lines, and yin is scarce, and therefore is it serves as usage, whereas the true fire resides in the bottom, and the yin is dominates it, but the yang is scarce, and therefore the lower residence serves, it says, as body. Now, I think all of you are familiar with the difference between Jung and T, and if you're not, well, I can't explain it now. So the two fires appear to be separated. They're different, they're optically, visually different, and they're not the same thing. One is heart and one is kidney. On the other hand, they are one fire. So if you think about the way they're formed, you can see that they, when you put them together, they recreate Qian and Kun, the three yang line triagram, and the three yin line triagram. Now, Genshin explains the physiology of the two fires, and this is a rather complicated drawing, but basically what it says is that between 11 and 1 a.m., what happens is that this fire in the kidneys starts stirring, and it starts wanting to go up. So by the time we come to midday, this fire has come all the way up, creating these two yang lines. And in raising, it takes the water with it. Now, from midday, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. really, the water starts moving, starts the water helps the yang basically from the two yang lines to descend. So that is the diagram that you see, and descend where? Descend to the kidneys. Yeah. So the way in which we move continuously from pre-event to post-event within our body is because there is one fraction of Qian that descends into Kun, and that makes the post-event world happen. Now, the consequences in terms of pathological mechanism is that when the yang qi, the yang aspect of yang qi is damaged, then what happens is that the yin will surge pathologically. Yang qi means heat, right, and means movement. And if yang is diminishing, then the cold and the stillness increase. Now, what happens is that you have a lot of water accumulating at the bottom, and you have this fire. And what it does, because this water grows out of proportion, that fire is pushed upwards. So it's moved up to the surface. And this is what Zhen Qinan calls empty fire. Now, the fourth principle, and this will all come together in a minute, the fourth principle is that we can never move away from the six Jing theory of the Shang and Lun. And the reason why we do that is because they express the changes and the transformation of the qi circulation in the circular way. So yang rises and yin grows, yang diminishes and yin hides. But also they give a time for a time and a space in which these changes occur. So we have some reference points to which look at and know, okay, is this the right thing that should happen right now or not? Now the six confirmation can, or Liu Qi, they facilitate the circulation of this exchange fire between the two fires, but because they're basically a system of gates that open, close, and move around some hinges, and therefore they open at the time they should open, they close at the time they should open, and they help this circulation to happen in time. But they can also not really work, and in that case we have problems. Now, very briefly, we can see how true qi moves in the year. In the winter, it's very calm and it's just resting to gain strength. In the spring, it starts stirring, and because nature needs to be born, that seed needs to come out of the soul. And of course, if there weren't the support of the yang or the kidneys, that could not happen. And in the summer, the true yang is at the top, is very mature, and in the human body, this corresponds to the Shaoyin Emperor fire, and which is the true yang. In autumn, the true yang comes down because the water, we've seen it, the water comes down and takes it with it, but also because the sun is less intense and diminishes, and the lymph goes back to the roots, and it's helped in thus descending by the Yaming stomach and by the Taiyin lungs, and it's moving into the Kan. The fifth principle is that Li Huming says, when can we use the energy of the sun? Well, when there is soil and water on the land. And this we know because if we go to a desert, we don't see any vegetation there because there is no water and the soil is not rich. And therefore, when we look at this exchange between the two fires, we need to think all the time that the soil and the water need to be strong from one aspect, and also they need to be viable. So if you think about the way these two fires exchange, you can see it. They're basically moving down and up, and they have to go upper jaw heart, lower jaw kidney, and they have to go through earth. Therefore, They say that the top creates stomach, the bottom, the yang descending creates stomach, the yang rising creates spleen, which is true earth. Therefore, earth can be damaged by the two fires not moving correctly, but also the two fires can be damaged by earth not moving correctly. And here we have the three jiao really operating as one. Basically, if we go back to the discourse of pre-heaven and post-heaven, we know that pre-heaven made post-heaven, but at the same time, if post-heaven doesn't function well, so if these two fires don't exchange properly, then pre-heaven cannot be refilled, cannot work. And this is just an image of earth. Our earth is important in all moments of the year, precisely because it has that ability to create viability passage, from one season to the other. This is just a comprehensive picture of what I've said so far, and again, all this movement is facilitated by the six confirmation. But if they're not well, they can affect it, and if anything goes wrong here, then everything just goes out of order. I have briefly talked already about the pathological mechanism, so I'm not going to go too much at length into that. But if we think of the kidney, they're made of two things. They're made of water and fire at the same time. And that fire is called true water, true fire. So when that becomes weak, water increases. It increases in the sense that it stagnates, it stays in a place, it doesn't move, it grows and grows and grows. And so you can have cold, damp, and phlegm. And when pushes the true yang upwards into the periphery, so the yang loses its place. It's not like a sun which has fixed position in the horizon, but it's actually all over the place. And this syndrome is called yin repels yang syndrome. So the more the water rises, the more the yang is pushed further, and the more we have symptoms of heat up, which are according to Zhen Qinan, and this is the real big thing about him, that empty fire does not come from yin deficiency, but it comes from yang deficiency, and this is a vicious cycle. And he very humorously say, well, as the town doctor sees empty fire rushing upward, he doesn't even inspect the vital wine, wherefore he opens his mouth and says, nourish the yin and descend fire. He self-proclaims to have grasped the problem and not even think of the principle where the yin surges, which means that the water is exuberant and the yang is deficient, and that means the emperor of fire is weak. And so what does he do? He supports the yin, it wets the yin and subdues the fire, which is exactly the opposite of what he should do, which is supporting the yang and not add, as he says, more snow to the snow field by increasing the coldness. So whenever a person has a yang deficient, the yin must surge. So we know that the symptoms and signs of yang deficient, no need that for me to say them. But what happens is that because of this mechanism of the water, of the cold pushing the yang up, it's a bit like being in the sun, in the snow, and having the sun rays hitting the snow. Well, it doesn't melt it, they reverberate upwards. So even though there are symptoms of fire which are very, very obvious at the top of the body, called deficient fire, then this fire happens because of the yin becoming stronger. And when this yin, instead of going down, starts building up and going upwards because it's building up in volume, then this is completely wrong. And what happens is that it becomes, the authority is not the leader anymore, and it creates symptoms that look like fire and the upper parts of the body. Now, Genshin recognized yin deficiency, yin vacuity as a syndrome, so it does talk about it, but it's not the theme of this talk. But in the modern application of the school, actually what it is said is that when the disease is of yin nature, you support the yang to restrain yin. And when the disease is yang nature, then you use the yang to transform yin. So yin generates yang, and yang generates yin, and yang controls yin. So if you work from the yang aspect, you can either generate it or you can control it. So basically, every disease is treated in that way. Now, what kind of symptoms we can meet? We can, first of all, we have this red face, hot body, and sweat. And that means that the true fire has gone upwards, but we can also have swollen face, red face, problem of the nose, mouth ulcers, itchy ears, bleeding gums, inflammation of the throat. And a lot of these seem to be yamming, obstruction problems. So what really happens? It's that the fire does not let the surging water does not let the fire go back. And you can find in different literature, you can find different names for the same syndrome. So the yuan does not receive, the original yang scatters outwards, true fire sends upwards, kidney qi does not receive, qi does not return to its origin, solitary yang surfaces upwards, and empty fire rushes upwards. And to end, I'll give you a little bit of insight in the principles of treatment. And I'm not going to go into prescription because whoever practices this already knows them, and who doesn't, this is just a very superficial lecture. So I wouldn't want people to just take the prescription and start applying them without having a deep understanding of this, because it could be dangerous. So Genshin says, whenever I see disease such as empty fire rushing upwards, where the patient loves to drink warm liquids and can't stomach anything cold, it is self-evident that nourishing the yin is a mistake. Also, when I said that cinnamon aconite caused the fire to return to its origin, no one really understands what I mean. What they don't know is that cinnamon aconite and ginger and dry ginger are pure balls of raging fire that go straight into that support directly true fire in the kidneys. So it's not tonifying any yang, the ordinary yang, but it's tonifying the yang that is hidden within the kidney. And the other thing that is recommended as principal treatment is that of strengthening the fire. In order that the earth is built properly and it's viable. That's it. So thank you very much for listening to me, and hope to see you in person at some point. Bye.